I'm your host, Kinetic, and you're watching GameOnEnd. Hello, welcome to our add-on series. Today, we're continuing our look at Trade Skill Master. So, let's start by looting the mailbox. Alright, let's do a quick search here for some items we can flip here. Let's see. Now, I usually like to do this first because it lets us kind of clean up the things we may be interested in posting. Alright, so not a lot here, but we can at least scoop up a few of these cheaper things. Let's take a look at enchanting materials. Okay. Leather. Now this group's pretty big, so this might be worth shrinking down again, which we can do in a minute. And lastly, ore. Alright, so let's go grab the things we bought. Alright. Alright, so now that we've got everything back up on the auction house, let's take a look at Sniper. So, by default, Sniper has its own kind of setup, and what it's doing is just looking at the last page of the auction house, basically the most recently posted items, and it's watching for things that are below a certain threshold. Now, you can run Sniper on its own without any setup, and it'll work, and will still be worth looking through, but there's a couple things we can do here to really tailor Sniper to work for us. So let's take a look. So here we have, under shopping options, we have our options for Sniper. You can set up a sound here that will play anytime Sniper finds a deal. If you have your sound on in the background, you can even be tabbed out or whatever, and kind of just leave this running, maybe when you're not playing but maybe working on something else or whatever, and you hear the little sound and you flip back over and can decide whether to buy something or not. You can also have it show items which are just basically posted below what they can sell to a vendor for. These may not be huge money, but they're free money, so I usually leave that checked. They're just simple items that you can grab and then clear out the mailbox and then take them to a vendor and sell them off. But here is where we can get into customizing our Sniper. So if this is set to 0 copper, it's not using any custom price. It's basically just using its own built-in pricing, which Tradesteel Master has set up. They kind of have their own custom little formula that they use to find this. But there's two things that we can do to really dial this into what we would like. So for starters, we can just put in a simple formula. So we can say we want anything that is 70% of the region average, and that'll basically show us any items that get posted for 70% of their market value or less. That may be fine, but you would get a lot of items showing up, and it may be overwhelming. It may be more things than you actually want to purchase. So the second function is where you can really customize this. So here in our operations, we have the option to include items that this shopping operation is applied to have those items show up in our Sniper searches. So let's take a look at our groups here and look at the operation for our crafting reagents. So we do have a shopping operation applied, which is crafting reagents by. So let's take a look here. So this is our criteria for purchasing these items. We're basically just looking for 80% of the market value or lower, and we can have that show in the Sniper searches. So now, in addition to just our default Sniper options, these will show based on this pricing. So we can add these items in to our Sniper searches, and that would have all of the items that when we go to the auction house and do those shopping searches, all of those items that have been showing up previously would also show up in our Sniper search. Now, right now, we have these numbers about the same, so we would get the same mix of items. But if we come in here and drop this to overall, we just want to see items that are half of their market value, well, then that's going to weed out a lot more items that are getting posted. But we still, because we have this shopping operation applied to our crafting items, and we have that including in the sniper searches, we now are telling TradeSkillMaster that we are willing to buy these items up to 80% of their value. So in general, it will only show us things that are half of their value or lower, except for these items that are assigned here, which we can see right now. This group is assigned to these items. So these items would all show up in our sniper search. Now, of course, this can take a full formula, just like anywhere else for a pricing source. So let's take a look at something a little more advanced. Now, there's a very popular sniper pricing string that is available out there by a user called BilisOnyxia, and it's simply a check function, but what he's done is nested that check function. Now, what is nesting? Well, let's do an example here. So in our check function, if you remember, we have A, B, and C. A being our math, B being if that math is positive, and C being if that math is negative. Well, we can do something simple like saying if the market average price for this item minus 100 gold is positive, well, what is that asking for? This is basically saying we are looking for items that are either over 100 gold or below 100 gold, and then we do two different things. So for sniper, typically people would use a check function like this to weed out items that to them may not be worth their time to flip. Now, this of course is up to you, how much time you have to spend on this, how many items you want to show up in your sniper results. So at the basics, people would choose a number that feels comfortable to them. So let's just say with this 100 gold right now, we don't want to bother with anything that is worth less than 100 gold, and we do if it's worth more. So what do we put in the positive and negative fields? Right now we're saying the market average. Let's fill in a number because that makes this easy to see. So if an item is worth 50 gold, well, 50 gold minus 100 gold would be a negative. We don't want that item. So the negative would be the place where we put the value that we don't want. So how would we ensure that no items show up that we don't want? Well, we can put in 1 copper, because nobody will be posting items for 1 copper. So that would basically say if an item is under 100 gold, then less than 100 minus 100 is negative, and that would go to this negative field, and that would basically say we only want to see items that are 1 copper or less. Well, that would basically mean nothing. Now, if it's positive, if we have an item that's worth 200 gold, well, 200 minus 100 is a positive, so then we can put in here how much we're willing to pay when it's over 100 gold. Okay, let's say that we are willing to pay 50% of the market value. Okay, simple. So we now have a working formula here that tells Sniper to only show us items that are over 100 gold, but that are 50% of their market value or less. Well, so what is the nesting function? Well, what happens if instead of one of these values, we add in another check function? Well, that will work. We just need to put it in the right place so that it does work. So you have to follow this logically. We start by weeding out one direction or the other, very low or very high. In my experience, it seems better to weed out high first than low, but there are ways that this can work in both directions. We just have to make sure that our math works. So I start by using numbers because that is the easiest way. When you start getting into something advanced, we're going to start losing how much we can see in the box at a given time and to know. This would best be done in a notepad, but you can do this right here in the box as well. And sometimes it may actually even be easier to type it in here because you can kind of work linearly. So let's start with this. Let's say if an item has a value of 500,000 gold or more. If we are saying that an item is worth 500,000 gold and we want to go to our first price, which let's say for an item of over 500,000 gold, the smaller margins still have big payoffs, right? Because even something at 90% of 500,000 is still a big gap for profit, even minus auction house cuts and things like that. So we may be willing to buy something for up to, let's say 75% of the market value for it. So any number we put in here up to 500,000 gold would make this a positive, right? So if we say that would be a positive. So that would pass through to this, and any number below 500,000 gold would be a negative. So that will pass through to this. Okay. So instead of just saying 1 copper, let's start a new check function. So we're saying if it's over 500,000 gold, that's fine. We already have the price that we're willing to pay for it, 75% of the market value. But if it's under that, well, we want to weed it out one more time. So let's do another check here. And let's say our next threshold is 200,000 gold. So what would make this a positive? Okay, and if it's positive, then we are willing to pay, let's say, 60%. Okay, and if it's a negative, then maybe we don't want to see it. We can just put in our 1 copper. So then we just have to double check that we have our parentheses here. So we have 1 wrapping this, and 1 wrapping this check, and then we would need 1 more to complete this first one. And this will actually work, but this doesn't tell us anything. This is just saying a number. So we need to replace this with this. And we will put this in because this is how it knows the value of an item. Okay, so we've now put those in. And this may seem complicated, but really all we've done is just told Sniper to check a couple of things. We've basically told it to check if it's worth 500,000 gold or more, and if it is, then we're willing to pay 75% or less, up to 75% or less. And if it's not worth 500,000 gold, then we check again to see if it's worth at least 200,000 gold. If it's worth 200,000 gold, we're willing to pay 60%. And if it's below 200,000 gold, it will pass to this last value, which is nothing will show up. So we've now told Sniper that we basically don't want to see anything below 200,000 gold, and anything above that we are willing to pay at these breakpoints, up to 60% or up to 75%. Well, this can obviously keep going indefinitely. You can keep putting more check functions in, and in Sniper strings like BilisOnyxia's, he breaks it down into a lot of price points and gives lower and lower thresholds. So obviously in this instance, you know, we have set these really high. We're not going to see very many items, and that may be good if you're really just looking for high value items to flip, you know, in which case you can say, I'm looking for items that are 2,000 gold or more, up to 60%, and items that are 50,000 or more, 75%. Okay, well, we've now widened the field of possible items that can show up for Sniper. We can even put in one last check if we want, to bring in a lower range. But let's go ahead and run this and see. Now, just for the example's sake, I'm going to raise this so that we have some items show up. Because if we set it too low of a threshold, then obviously we'd have to be hoping that there are any items posted at those points. So let's go in here and start Sniper. And Sniper will now start scanning the last page of the auction house and looking for items that meet those criteria we've put in for Sniper. Now, whether something will show up here or not is hard to say. Depending on your economy of your server, there may be a lot of items that show up, there may be fewer. And if you're on a lower population server, like I am here, you may have to widen those margins, as in putting higher percentages that you're willing to pay. And of course, remember, you can also add in those items in the normal shopping operations that you want to show up in your Sniper results as well. So we, in theory, could have those crafting reagents showing up at that 80% margin, and then everything else in the auction house would be limited to those values that we set in the primary Sniper settings. So, of course, nothing's shown up here. That's not surprising. It's pretty typical that things wouldn't show up when you put really low values, because of course there are other people out there that are running these, and they are scooping these up quickly as they come in. So go ahead and jump back into the settings here, and let's go ahead and add in this to our sniper searches. Okay, so we just adjusted the numbers just so we could get some things to show up here. As we can see, we had a recipe pop up here. So the market value of this is 1,217 gold. The average sale price of this is 384, and it's posted up here for 5 gold. So that would definitely be a great buy. If only we had 28 more silver. Feels bad. We have a pet posted up here for 10,000 gold, which is great. This person either does not know what they're doing or is just trying to clear out of this server. It's a very low population server, so in fact it may be the lowest one on the US. So, no surprise. But, as we can see here, stuff's popping up. What the heck? Let's put in a bid. And that should do it for Sniper. Like I said, there's a lot you can do with getting into making these pretty advanced. Or leave it as simple as you like. You can simply just put in something like a percentage of the market value, or anything you like, really. But play around with it, find settings that work for you, that have items that show up that you would like to purchase. And then the one other thing I would say, that's an advanced tip, is if you regularly get items that show up in your sniper results, and they are things that you just do not want to buy, you don't even want them to show up, what you can do is you can create a group of items that you don't want to buy. Now, you can either put this as a subgroup, of something else, or just make a new group here. Whatever you'd like to do. But let's say we do not want to see minor healing potions. So we put this in a group, and we go to our operations, and we apply a shopping operation. Now, this might seem counterintuitive, but what we're doing is we're telling Sniper that we would like to apply custom operations to these items that are in this subgroup. And you can make this as many times as you want if you're putting these under different categories, for BOEs or for reagents or anything really. But you make a separate group. You can keep it as a subgroup if you're trying to organize, or do it separate, but you make a separate group of items. Now, I would recommend doing it as subgroups, because that way you can still have other operations applied to it, such as crafting operations or mailing operations. You can still separate those things out. So let's say that we have an alchemist and we can make these potions. So if they're profitable, then we could go and tell TSM that we want to craft that item. When we get to the crafting section, we can look at that. But just for the notes here for Sniper, we can tell it that we want to craft that item, which would be an option here, but we never want to buy it. So we are willing to craft them when they're profitable and sell them, and we can apply apply auctioning operations to them and mailing and crafting. But we can also apply this shopping operation. Now we don't have one here, so let's make this here. We do create new operation and just call it don't buy. And we simply, yes, we can assign this to the don't buy. We simply put in a price of 1 copper. That tells Sniper that we want to buy these items, except only when they're 1 copper or less, which won't happen. So what we have now done here is added this to our Sniper searches, and this tells Sniper to keep an eye out for any items that are in this list and only display them if they're 1 copper or less, which effectively will weed those items out. So it doesn't matter if that item is posted for 10% of its market value, 1% of its market value. It doesn't matter how good of a deal it is. If it's a thing we just don't want to buy, then we add it to one of these don't buy lists and they will not show up. So the typical things that I use the don't buy lists for are things that people tend to try and manipulate in the auction house, such as there are a lot of white armor drops that really have no value. They're just vendor trash, and in most cases they just can't be worth more than whatever they would vendor for. But what people will do is put these items up on the auction house, and let's say you have a white, leather chest piece. So you would post that item on the auction house every day for a couple of weeks. You could even go as far as 60 days to clear out what basically Tradescale Master's pricing data, or the Blizzard's auction data, will then start registering that item as being worth whatever they've posted it for. So they may post that leather chest piece for 10,000 gold for 60 days. And then at the end of 60 days, they post that item for 1,000 gold. Well, somebody now that has not blocked that item out, that's running Sniper, that item will pop up in their Sniper window because it now says, hey, this thing is 10% of its market value because it's been posted for 10,000 gold for the last 2 months. And now it's only 1,000 gold. What a great deal. Except that item was never worth 10,000 gold, and it's definitely not worth 1,000 gold. But somebody who's just kind of mindlessly maybe watching TV or doing something else and just buying up anything that pops up in Sniper because maybe they have their settings set so low, maybe to 5%, and they think, well, I mean, anything that's 5% or lower is worth buying, and so they don't pay attention. They just click buy on their Sniper, and they will scoop that item up thinking they just got a deal on something, and really they got tricked. So those items, I like to build out a list, and anything that shows up in Sniper, that's a thing that I in the future don't want to see. I just go ahead and add it to the appropriate don't buy list, and that will effectively weed those items out of my search results. That will do it for this episode. If you've enjoyed this, remember, pressing the like button is absolutely free. Subscribe and stay tuned for more Game on End.